Hi, I'm Taylor Cantrell. I'm from Kansas City. I'm 20 years old, and I'm a Ecology and Society student at Depaw University. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up on how different countries are breaking down. Today, we just saw Obama speak on the UN floor. He was pretty rough with other countries. He basically said, we have our plan laid out, and we're waiting for you guys to come on board. But to understand how that speech was interpreted by all the other countries, you have to get a little bit of history. So the developed countries for some time have been putting pressure on China and India, whose emissions are growing the fastest, to set a plan for reducing their emissions in the future. However, China and India also have the biggest populations of poor people in the world. And the current model for getting those poor people out of poverty is through industrialization, which right now depends on carbon emissions and fossil fuel burning. Another set of countries that are becoming really important are small island states that are most vulnerable to climate change. So these are states that may be only 3 meters above sea level at a maximum, and as sea level rise continues, as it has been, these are the states that are going to be most vulnerable to having to move to another country or somehow leave the land that they've lived on for thousands of years. So small island states are increasingly important to this debate. And in fact, President Mohammed Nasheed of the Maldives, that's a good state to look up if you don't know about it yet. Another one would be Tuvalu. Both very small states that are basically being threatened, their people are being threatened for their very survival. Those states are all asking for much more drastic cuts than the US or the EU are providing right now. The EU has committed to 30% cuts if other countries come on board with the treaty. The US is committing to 17% cuts, but that's actually a little confusing because they're using a different baseline for their emissions reductions. The small island states and developing countries that are really going to have to deal with the changes that are going to come with climate change, which are mostly damages for them, are asking for $400 billion per year in adaptation finance, and the EU and the US and other developed countries have committed to $10 billion over the next 3 years. And yesterday, Hillary Clinton announced $100 billion by 2020. But much of the American media has focused on how that $100 billion is far more than we've committed in the past and should be enough for developing countries. However, it's important to understand the $100 billion will come both from the government and from companies that are going to be financing projects in those countries. It's also going to be from all developed countries, not just the U.S. And lastly, there isn't even a way for the U.S. to commit to that financial commitment yet. So it's really up in the air as to whether the U.S. would follow through on that, because in the past the U.S. hasn't followed through on financial commitments to developing countries. So that's kind of a couple of the countries that are involved in this negotiation. As you can see, it's pretty complicated. We were hoping that Obama could come with something to make a compromise to get a deal through, and it looks like the U.S. isn't providing that compromise right now.